Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Bahasham, Barakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure unto the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'm going to start it off in Zephaniah 3, verse 8. Therefore, wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, the heathen nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh is quickly gathering these heathen nations into World War III, which the final confrontation is going to take place in Western Asia, which people refer to as the Middle East, in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, and it will go nuclear, as it said. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And I opened up this video with this verse to preface a few articles showing that Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai is quickly, gathering these nations, in place for, that third woe. But the first article I'll be going to is on RT.com, and it's titled, Ivan Timofeev, We're close to the war nobody wants, but everybody's preparing for. For my determination is to gather the nations. And as it says in Joel chapter 3, verse 9, wake up the mighty men. Hey, let all the men of war draw near, and beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Can nuclear weapons help prevent a war between Russia and NATO? And no, it can't. U.S. President Donald Trump's recent push for peace in Ukraine highlights a troubling reality. The options for resolving the conflict are narrowing. Kiev continues to rely on NATO military support, while member states are ramping up defense spending and bolstering their arms industries. The Ukraine war may yet spark a broader confrontation between Russia and NATO. For now, the chances remain low, thanks in large part to nuclear deterrence. But how strong is that deterrent today? It's difficult to gauge the role of nuclear weapons in modern warfare. Their only combat use, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, occurred under vastly different political and technological conditions. Nonetheless, most international relations experts agree that nuclear weapons serve as powerful deterrents. Even a small nuclear arsenal is seen as a shield against invasion. The cost of aggression becomes unthinkable. By this logic, Russia, as a nuclear superpower, should be nearly immune to external military threats. The use of nuclear weapons has become a political and moral taboo, though military planners still quietly game out scenarios. The dominant belief holds that nuclear weapons are unusable and that no irrational actor would challenge a nuclear-armed state. But is that belief grounded in reality? Hey, everything is grounded in prophecy and the will of the Lord. As it says in Proverbs 21, verse 1, the king's mind or heart, your la'ab, is in the hand of the Lord. He moveth it whichsoever he will. So to the average mind, it would be natural to think that, nobody would be crazy enough to use nuclear weapons because it would cause, irreparable damage in their minds. But we're on the Lord's time, and he calls for nuclear weapons to be used. Which brings me to 2 Peter chapter 3. I'm going to read verses 10 to 12. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements physical things upon the earth shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Hey, the fire of the Lord's jealousy, on the earth. Speaking of those nuclear missiles, verse 11, seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, speaking to the elect of the nation of Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as the Israelite foreigners who through the scattering of the curses and living amongst these heathens have, come to look like them physically. What manner should you be in, reading all these things and seeing it line up perfectly with biblical prophecy? You should be looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of the Most High, because these nuclear missiles bring about the dissolving of the heavens or the rulership of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, and these other heathens behind him. Because in the scriptures, heaven and hell can be symbolic for a condition. Heaven in rulership, hell in captivity, at the bottom where the children of Israel currently are. And when these nukes come, that's when that role reversal comes, and our heavens begin, and Esau and these heathens' hells begin as well, wherein the heavens, being on fire, shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, mentioning that melting, that burning again. For Russia, this is becoming an increasingly urgent question at the risk of direct confrontation with NATO or individual NATO members grows, which Russia will have a confrontation directly with the West, especially in the context of Ukraine, but ultimately in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. There are political flashpoints aplenty. Both Russia and NATO have made their grievances known. Whether these tensions erupt into conflict will depend not just on intent, but on military, industrial capacity, and force readiness. And these are changing fast. Now I'm going to jump down. Let's see. Could nuclear deterrence stop that? At first glance, yes. In a direct clash, Russia would likely begin with conventional strikes, but the war in Ukraine has shown that conventional weapons, even when effective, rarely force capitulation. If Russia ever considered using nuclear weapons, two broad scenarios exist. The first is a preemptive tactical strike on enemy troop concentrations or infrastructure. The second is a retaliatory strike following NATO escalation. The first is politically perilous. It would frame Russia as the aggressor and trigger diplomatic isolation. The second also violates the nuclear taboo, but might be seen differently in a global opinion. Either way, NATO can retaliate with conventional or nuclear force. A Russian strike could provoke a devastating counterattack. Moscow would then face a grim choice: fight on conventionally and risk defeat, escalate with more nukes, or unleash strategic weapons, inviting mutual destruction. And tactical to strategic weapons will be used, but there won't be, as the term, mutually assured destruction, where the whole earth is just completely, annihilated with, from people on it. There will be people to survive, and, land masses will go back to normal. It's only particular areas, one in particular, that's just going to be completely wiped off the face of the earth and remain a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the belief that Russia would never go nuclear, fearing retaliation, has created a false sense of security among some NATO leaders. That illusion could tempt escalation by conventional means, starting in Ukraine and spreading abroad. It would require NATO to abandon its Cold War caution. Who would suffer most in such a scenario? Ukraine, which would bear the brunt of intensified fighting, Russia, which could face missile barrages and a possible ground invasion, the eastern NATO states, potential targets of Russian retaliation or even invasion. The United States might escape the initial consequences unless strategic nukes are deployed, but escalation is rarely predictable. If tactical exchanges spiral, even the U.S. could be drawn into a nuclear conflict, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But that's it with this article. But keep in mind going forward that it says the U.S. could be drawn into a nuclear conflict. But now, I ain't going to read the article, but I'll just read the title. The age of American nuclear privilege is over, because Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai has allowed these different nations to get nuclear weapons. And, yay, spoilers, America's going to be the main target when everything's said and done. But now I'm going to go to my next article, just further showing that Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is moving these chess pieces in place to use those nukes. And this is from the independent.co.uk. UK and France agree nuclear weapons can be used in tandem to deter Russia. So, another article, talking about nukes being used as a deterrent. But according to biblical prophecy, it's not going to be a deterrent, but it's going to be determined that they're going to be used. France and Britain are the only two nuclear powers in Europe. The UK and France have agreed to coordinate their nuclear deterrence, Sir Keir Starmer said, in a joint show of force against adversaries like Russia. The Prime Minister said there was no greater demonstration of the importance of the UK-France relationship than the new initiative. The Northwood Declaration, signed by Sir Keir and French President Emmanuel Macron, means that Europe's two sovereign nuclear powers would mobilize their deterrent together if threatened. The Franco-British move is designed to act as a warning to Russia. It comes as U.S. President Donald Trump has called on European allies to step up their contribution to NATO, and as the U.S. tilts its influence away from Europe towards the Pacific. The Prime Minister said, "Now, as Europe's only nuclear powers and as leaders in NATO, we play a vital role in preserving the peace and security on this continent. So today we've updated the historic Lancaster House Treaty to protect our people and our way of work. This is a major modernization. We signed the Northwood Declaration confirming for the first time that we are coordinating our independent nuclear deterrence. From today, our adversaries will know that any extreme threat to this continent would prompt a response from our two nations." Let's see this article. But now let's get back to prophecy, what's truly going to take place. This is Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. "One woe or destruction is past," referring to World War I, "and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. World War II, which is past, and World War III, which is quickly coming upon us." This is Isaiah 34. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the header reads, "God's wrath against the nations, the heathen nations. Come near, ye nations, to hear, and hearken, ye people. Let the earth hear, and all that is therein, the world and all things that come forth of it. For the indignation of Yahweh is upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. For my determination is to gather the nations." And what? For the earth to be burned up in the fire of my jealousy. "He hath utterly destroyed them. He hath delivered them to the slaughter, into the valley of Jehoshaphat for the war of Armageddon, where there's going to be a great slaughter of those heathens' militaries, especially the U.S.'s over there. Their slain also shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll. And this is going into those nuclear missiles being used. And the heavens being rolled together as a scroll is that mushroom cloud. Because when you look at footage of a mushroom cloud, what does it look like? The detonation takes place, the cloud goes up into the air, and what? Rolls into itself and looks like a scroll being rolled together. And all their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falleth off from the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, being those nuclear missiles. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea, which is the Greek way of saying Edom. The Edomites again being you so-called white people, and upon the people of my curse to judgment, because you Edomites and the different places you dwell are going to be the main targets of these nuclear missiles. Everywhere Edomites are, missiles are going to hit. And you Edomites are the curse of the Lord. For one, you're cursed with biblical leprosy. You're clean lepers. You're so-called white, though you're really red all over. Read Leviticus chapter 13. And what? You're the only nation after the first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven that's going to be completely wiped off the face of the earth. The sword of Yahweh is filled with blood. It is made fat with fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams, sacrificial animals. It's relating this destruction and these nukes hitting to a great sacrifice. For Yahweh hath a sacrifice in Basra, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumea. And Basra was an ancient city, a chief ancient city of the Edomites. So spiritually, your modern day Basra would be America. And remember from that first article we read, there's a chance that America could be drawn into a nuclear confrontation. It's not a chance, it's a certainty, because biblical prophecy dictates it to be so. But now I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 50. I'm going to start at verse 9. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, the daughter of Babylon, Babylon the Great, the United States of America, an assembly of great nations from the north country. And that north country is speaking of Russia, which is north of the U.S. And as I've said in previous lessons, Russia shooting missiles from the north, across the Arctic Ocean region and from the Arctic Ocean region, because, Russia has been building up its military assets, nuclear capable there over the last few years. To reach the U.S. would be the shortest time it would take for those missiles to reach the U.S. And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. And as those missiles were described as a sword back in Isaiah 34, in Jeremiah 50, they're described as bows and arrows, because when the prophets saw these visions thousands of years ago, they didn't know what a nuclear missile was, so they had to describe it the best way they could with weapons they knew during their times, bows and arrows and swords and spears. And when you look at a missile flying through the sky, it looks like an arrow. But another thing is that it says an assembly of great nations from the north country are also going to come against Babylon with missiles. And who's that? Hey, not only Russia's allies like China or North Korea, and Iran, but also America's own allies, which are going to turn against her as well at some point during World War III. And as we read in that second article, the UK and France were, doing joint deals to, have their nuclear arsenals ready to go to deter Russia. But hey, they're ultimately going to be used against America. This is Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast. And the 10 horns is referring, to the European Union. The first 10, which, began with, 10 common markets back when it was known as the European Economic Community. And the beast is referring to NATO. And this is going into what? That last leg of the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 2. those iron toes mixed with miry clay, this NATO EU system, which the US is a part of and at the head of, which is the reincarnated Roman Empire. Because, when you go to Blue Letter for Daniel chapter 2, they just recently put names, above, the different parts of that statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, which represented different heathen kingdoms. And you had the legs of iron, which it says Rome, which is speaking of the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. And then, curiously enough, they don't name what those iron toes mixed with miry clay are, but that's the system we're currently in, the reincarnated Roman Empire. So again, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the EU and NATO, these shall hate the whore that rides upon the beast, which when you read further up in this chapter, it says it's a mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, so America, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, that fire from those nuclear missiles. But now let's jump down to verse 41 in Jeremiah 50. Behold, a people shall come from the north, that north country Russia, and a great nation, and many kings, that assembly of great nations, shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth. They shall hold the bow and the lance, the nuclear missiles and their launch platforms. They are cruel and will not shew mercy. Their voice shall roar like the sea, and they shall ride upon horses, everyone put in array like a man to the battle against thee, O daughter of Babylon, the United States of America. And like I said earlier, everywhere you Edomites dwell are going to be hit with nuclear missiles, but one place is going to be wiped off the face of the earth and never be inhabited again, and that is, ding, 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 America. As the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, saith Yahweh. And when you read Revelation 11, verse 8, it refers to America as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, which it's easy to see why America would be known as spiritual Sodom with all the alphabet rainbow freakism that goes on here. And ancient Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed with fire and brimstone from the sky. So this modern Sodom and Gomorrah is going to be destroyed with that modern fire and brimstone. 200 million nuclear missiles. So shall no man abide there, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. And it's going to become a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland. First, the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea. And then, a desert where man, woman, or child will never set foot on ever again. And after the dust and the smoke settles, only desert creatures are going to be dwelling here. Verse 39, therefore the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owls shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever. And this is how we know it's not talking about ancient Babylon, which is in modern day Iraq. You've got people there as we speak going about their daily lives. Neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwat were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharella, and until next time, Shalom.